Folk Club on BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle.
Hello, and you're very welcome to another session of the best of folk and traditional music. Colum Sands with you here. Good to have your company on a night when we open up a good few tunes and stories. There's a man on his way up the winding stairs to Studio 8 here round about now, and he knows all about fiddles and bows. And he knows the stairs very well too, because he was sitting in as presenter of Folk Club for me here last year. Neil Martin has been travelling in the last few weeks with a brand new album from his West Ocean String Quartet, and we'll hear more about the makings of that very shortly. First, a tune dedicated to a monastic worker of wood, the wood turner. Beautiful, the wood turner. That's from the new album from the West Ocean String Quartet, An Indigo Sky. Delighted to say that Neil Martin from the quartet has just walked in through the door, a door he knows well. You're very welcome, Neil.
Thank you indeed.
It's good to see you back in here and have a chance to say face to face. Thanks for keeping the programme going here all through last year.
Colum, it was an honour. I loved it, and I loved all the people here in the BBC, and what an indulgence to play music that you enjoy for a year. It was
couldn't beat it. Yeah. Well, that you've been doing all sorts of other things, obviously, during that year, one of them being the production of this album. The track we just heard, inspired by a monastic wood turner, I believe. What pictures go through your head listening to that and thinking about the man in question?
Well, I know brother Kieran Forbes. He's down in Glenstall in Limerick, and he's a man very, very passionate about music, all sorts of music, especially opera. But a terrific wood turner and a man with an international reputation for turning beautiful bowls. And a lot of it would be fallen wood from round the estate. And he fashions bowls out of the most beautiful bowls out of all sorts of elm and beech and other types of wood. But I had this kind of bizarre image in my head of Kieran Farbs working a foot lathe or a treadle lathe, which he doesn't, of course, but I had this image of him in the monk's cassock and
the white rope around his waist.
Aye, all of that, and him very exasperated and maybe a bit cranky from the night before kind of stuff, and the wood not turning and the lathe rather not turning at regular revolutions, and hence the tune itself kind of undulating between different tempi and things like that.
Sort of kind of a turmoil between a jig and a reel in there somehow.
Absolutely that. And I took delivery about a year ago or a year and a half ago of a very beautiful bowl from Kieran, and it was always in my mind to write something for him to mark that. And you know, you look at the bowl, you hold the bowl, you touch the bowl, and it's every time I return to it, I see something different, or a different pattern and a different hue in it. I think it's an extraordinary craft, and very intuitive craft, I think, that you need to have the feel for. But Farbs is a great man, no doubt.
Well, the wood of the instruments in the quartet certainly paying a great tribute to that man. Could you remind us of the lineup in the quartet, Neil?
Seamus Maguire, who's a native of Sligo, played with buttons and bows in his time and many other operations. Seamus now lives in Letterkenny. He plays violin. And also on violin, Niamh Crowley, who is from Ross's Point in Sligo. And Niamh would come from a more classical background. She has her own Academy of Music in Sligo, and she tours the world with Barry Douglas in Camerata, Ireland. And then on viola, Ken Rice. Ken is from Tralee, and he plays with the Irish Chamber Orchestra and has worked in many, many different setups, a lot of jazz and other, you know, he was in a kind of pop band called Engine Alley at a stage, and he had a piazzolla ensemble at a stage as well, and plays a lot of that tango and waltz music. So that's Ken and myself then on cello.
Great mix of musicians, and I would like to talk to you later on about that, you know, balancing act. We were just listening to a piece that kind of danced between a reel and a jig, and you know, as musicians you're going between what I would perceive as two worlds, and yet you make them into the one on the way that you put the music together. But you mentioned buttons and bows there. There's a piece on the album which it's just a beautiful 3/4 waltz piece. You know, I'd say if anyone was listening in the kitchen at home now and there was somebody sitting across the table from them that hadn't danced in years, this would be the chance to pull them up onto the floor. Yeah. And if there's nobody in the kitchen, take a floor brush or something. It's just a beautiful waltz. Track 13, could you introduce this one, Neil?
Yeah, Ile de la Madeleine. We got this from Seamus, and Seamus learnt it, I think, sometime maybe in the early 1980s, I think, when he was over in Canada. And he kind of fashioned it and worked at it, and Buttons and Bows recorded it, and he played it for us a couple of years ago. And exactly as you say, it's a very, very beautiful melody, and it had been used as well, I think, sometime in the 1950s. It was a kind of hit. Somebody did a kind of country version of it and put words to it, and it became a kind of show band hit in America sometime in the 50s. But our version is less kind of gingham than that.
We'll have a listen to that version now from the West Ocean String Quartet. What about that for a waltz? Les Îles de Madeleine, a beautiful arrangement there from the West Ocean String Quartet on their new album An Indigo Sky. Neil Martin sitting across the table from me here in Studio 8 tonight. Neil, a few weeks ago I played another waltz that you were involved in, totally different in many ways, the Corsican waltz from your days with Cran.
Oh yeah.
And I know we're very much focusing tonight on the album An Indigo Sky, but you're a man of many parts, and you played cello and pipes in that band a good few years ago. And I suppose there'd have been more, more wildness in that format of music. I mean, if you go to a concert of a string quartet, you need to know when to clap and when not to clap. And there's not going to be any chat. You can have a 40-minute, 1 hour piece without a word being spoken.
Yes, yeah.
Do you move comfortably between those two situations?
Yeah, I do. I guess, Colum, I was very lucky in my parents being so supportive and encouraging of traditional music on uilleann pipes and classical music and cello, and lots of other stuff in between as well. My father had a fantastic record collection. I remember the Beatles, early Beatles albums in the 60s. I remember he had Bakelite handwritten discs, Louis Armstrong and the Hot Five, Parlophone, handwritten labels, and fantastic jazz records. I remember Ry Cooder, film scores, Sean O'Reilly. It was a great healthy mix. So we kind of grew up with all of those musics being played in the house. So they were always kind of comfortable enough for me, and then in my late teens when I began to do traditional stuff on cello and classical music, actually modern compositions and orchestral stuff in uilleann pipes, it seemed a very natural kind of cross-fertilisation. So I never saw them. I think there are more elements that unite traditional and classical music. The more things pull them together than separate them, and I always felt comfortable with both.
That's a great way to look at it. Breadth of mind in music or in anything else is a very healthy approach. Yeah. And you mentioned all kinds of music there. I think you were called upon to remember some brass influences on keyboards, as it were, on an arrangement of a song that we might have listened to from Cran.
Okay.
I think the song Laughin' Half Daft, I think it's a kind of a play on words with a ton in Wales, and I'm going to be there before this weekend is out. It's somewhere near Cardiff, I think, isn't it?
I'm not sure. It has to be at least 20 years since we recorded the song, but I remember that was we wanted to have a brass band and kind of tubas making low noises and trombones and maybe some cornets and things like that, because there was so much humour in the song. And there's great humour in music, and you can find great humour, and certain instruments lend themselves better to humour, and whereas I love the serious brass band world, it can also be a humorous world. So that was what we were after in that song.
We'll have a listen to some of that humour now. Laughin' Half Daft, Neil Martin here, and the band Cran.
I've come from Laughin' Half Daft and half o'er the Welsh mountains, where the leeks and the violets and the nanny goats dwell. I've come here in search of a lovely young maiden, and where she has gone to I'm sure I can't tell. She's the pride of her gender, her waist small and slender, her hair is magenta and she squints with one eye. She talks like a parson, she sings like a nightingale, and if I don't find her I'm sure I will die. So I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny, where can she be? I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny, where can she be? Her home and her family are highly respected. Her mother milks cows on a three-legged stool. Her father's a farmer, her aunt is a lady, her uncle's a rogue and her brother's a fool. I'm courting sweet Jenny, I told her I loved her. We were to be married upon a May morn, but there came a young soldier from the Royal Artillery, and on the next morning my Jenny was gone. So I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny, where can she be? I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny, where can she be? Oh, say, have you seen her? To you I'll describe her. She wears a red petticoat and a hat on her head. She moves when she's walking, she speaks when she's talking. Her handkerchief's lettered O-P-X-Y-Z. I searched through the mountains, I searched through the valleys, I climbed Caventoul, I looked up in the air. I searched holes and corners, I read through the papers, I looked up the chimney but found her nowhere. So farewell to you, Jenny, you've gone with your soldier. I never will find you wherever you be. No more will I wander o'er hills and o'er mountains. Farewell to you, Jenny, wherever you be. So I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny. Where can she be? I'll weep and I'll wander o'er hills and o'er mountains in search of my Jenny. Oh, where can she be?
Laugh and Half Daft. That's Sean Corcoran, Desi Wilkinson and Neil Martin. Neil with us tonight talking about his new album with the West Ocean String Quartet and Indigo Sky. Laugh and Half Daft there. Neil, you were sort of bent over laughing a few times, I think, with memories of good times during that recording.
It was a great album. We started that album, Colum, I think in 1988, and we kind of recorded it in bits and pieces, and it came out sometime in the early 90s, and engineered by Mud Wallace, Sean Wallace up in Homestead.
Yes, in
recording
Randallstown.
studio is a place no more. But no, very happy memories of those days.
This, what kind of fascinates me about your work with the quartet, because I've been to a few concerts recently of quartets, and the beautiful music, you could close your eyes and it just washes over you. But I'm always, I'm intrigued about how musicians can stay serious for so long, without saying anything and all that. But you manage to get, humour and life into the playing and the quartet. There's a piece, The Humours of Ballyloughlin, and listening to it, although it's arranged for quartet, I just got the feeling that the fiddle player or the violin player, Seamus Maguire,
yes,
yeah,
indeed.
He's been given the freedom to play. It's almost like a dancer being allowed to dance freely without too many drapes and cloaks being put on them. Do you think consciously about that when you're making the arrangements and when you sit down to record?
Yes, I do. What I do, I write and arrange all the music for the quartet, so it's quite tailor-made, Column, to each individual's strengths. And I mean, Seamus straddles both camps. He played in various orchestras as a young fellow, but would become more strongly from a traditional perspective. And the last thing you want to do with a great traditional player like Seamus would be to hold back or stifle or not give him head space to do his thing. So in all the arrangements we do, I very carefully write the thing to allow that. And also, Colin, when we recorded this album in just over 2 days. We don't kind of go in from overdubs or things like that. We play it and we keep playing it until we get a really musical take, or what feels to us to be a musical take, because I think something like a quartet, as organic as a string quartet, that has to be there. It's not it's not like a cut and paste thing that we can do with different sampled musics and so on, and we can do so much in post-production now. We need, in something like a quartet, where it is essentially 4 people in the same room making music, we have to get the music. You have to get the musicality of the thing right. But as well, we actually don't perform that much with the quartet. We keep it quite special. People are busy with so many other things. So when we do come together, we hugely enjoy the music we make, and it feels very special every time we do play. And that keeps it fresh, and we don't live in each other's space too much, I know a lot of ensembles, the very famous Amadeus String Quartet, who played together for 40 years. But it got towards the end that not only would they take, if they were all flying to Los Angeles, they would fly with 4 different airlines and they would stay in 4 different hotels. But when they got onto the stage, they made incredible music. Now, that's a bit extreme for me.
Drastic, yeah.
I want to really like the people I make music with. Do you know what I mean? Maybe the Amadeus were touring too much. I'm not sure how it was for them, but no, it is very special for us when we do get together.
Well, there's very much a sense of 4 musicians in one room and in one way of thinking and living in this piece we're about to have a listen to now. Okay. Lend an ear to the humours of Ballylocklin. Lovely. The humours of Ballylocklin, the West Ocean String Quartet. Neil Martin with us tonight with this new album, An Indigo Sky. Great lift in that playing, Neil. And the tune you were saying while we listened goes back quite a bit too.
Yeah, I got that tune from Liam O'Flynn. In fact, I heard it first of all on a Planksty album, and then subsequently Liam did teach it to me. And Liam got it from Willie Clancy. And I was chatting to Liam about it when I was putting the sleeve notes together for the album. Willie probably got it from his father Gilbert, who probably got it from some of those pipers, maybe Garrett Barry, you know, some of the 19th century pipers. So I love the direct connection with the tune. and it's a wonderfully happy, great kind of piping tune, and there's a great openness to the tune. It's one of the big tunes in the tradition, no doubt.
And a great version there too. It's keeping life in an old tune, and this whole project or whole album, it celebrates a life and mourns a death as well, doesn't it? Tell us about that, Neil.
Well, Joseph Brown, a young fella from Crusheen on the Clare-Galway border, and he died tragically in an accident on Achill Island about 7 years ago. And he was a medical student at Galway, but he was a very fine fiddle player, piano player, dancer, footballer, polymath of a boy. And there is a spring school of traditional music in his memory, now held in Kinvara each February, the Joseph Brown Spring School. And Maura O'Keefe, who was his fiddle teacher and who is involved very much in the festival, asked me a few years ago to write some music in his memory. So I went down and I talked to his mother, and I went to the family home, and I walked the kind of roads Joseph would have gone, and I thought a long while. I never met Joseph in my life, but I listened to some of his music, some early recordings of his music, and I was most impressed with the young fella. And I can only imagine where it all might have led had he, lived a normal life, in terms of duration, and had his music come to fruition in the way it was indicating that it would have. So I wrote a 4-movement suite in his memory, and the title "An Indigo Sky." After Joseph died, he became associated with rainbows. I think when he was found, there was a very strong rainbow in the sky, and the day of his funeral, a very strong rainbow, and so on. And I wanted something of that sense of colour, and I've always loved that indefinable colour of indigo. It seems to draw you kind of heavenwards, upwards to the sky. And it just seemed a suitable overarching title, an indigo sky.
A beautiful tribute, and there's a piece on the album, and it kind of caught my eye because it's a tune, an old tune, a very old one, that was taken about 200 years ago by Tom Moore. He set lyrics to it and gave it a new lease of life, I suppose. And you have done it here with the quartet. Is that part of what you think about when you? I know you have your own excellent compositions on here, but you've taken old tunes. Are you thinking about that, giving them a few more, directions and legs, as it were, to walk forward?
Well, some of those old tunes are very popular because they're so brilliant as melodies, there's no doubt. And I've always loved The Minstrel Boy, and in part, yes, I wanted to revisit that tune. And it's also dedicated to the memory of a late friend, David Hammond, because we played this at David's funeral, and David was a great authority on Tom Moore songs, and I guess it's a combination of those things, the life experience of somebody who's died, and great songs, and I mean, it's such a fantastic melody. At the 10th anniversary of 9/11 in New York, 2 pieces were played at Ground Zero, the American National Anthem and The Minstrel Boy. And for me, it embodies Ireland in some fantastic way, and it has, when we think of Thomas Moore's words and the beauty of the tune and their perfect marriage, in some ways it's almost anthem-like in its beauty.
Beautiful piece, no better way to end this little chat. An Indigo Sky, the West Ocean String Quartet. It's a beautiful album. Neil, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Not at all, Colum, it's been great. And just a very quick word, if I might say.
Of course.
I'm so thankful to Neil Shawcross, who painted the image on the front of the album. I asked Neil, I explained a little of An Indigo Sky and the story behind it, let him hear some early recordings, and Neil came up with this beautiful image. He's a terrific artist.
A wonderful painting, just looking at it here, that goes with the album as well. Well, wherever you're listening tonight, many thanks for your company. It's been great to have you. I hope you'll join us at the same time next week. Till then, from producer Joanne Murphy, from me, Colum Sands, with thanks to Neil Martin, I'll take my leave with The Minstrel Boy. See you at the same time next week.
Club on BBC Radio Ulster and BBC Radio Foyle.
Hello, and you're very welcome to another session of the best of folk and traditional music. Colum Sands with you here. Good to have your company on a night when we open up a good few tunes and stories. There's a man on his way up the winding stairs to Studio 8 here round about now, and he knows all about fiddles and bows. And he knows the stairs very well too, because he was sitting in as presenter of Folk Club for me here last year. Neil Martin has been travelling in the last few weeks with a brand new album from his West Ocean String Quartet, and we'll hear more about the makings of that very shortly. First, a tune dedicated to a monastic worker of wood, the wood turner. Beautiful, the wood turner. That's from the new album from the West Ocean String Quartet, An Indigo Sky. Delighted to say that Neil Martin from the quartet has just walked in through the door, a door he knows well. You're very welcome, Neil.
Thank you indeed.
It's good to see you back in here and have a chance to say face to face. Thanks for keeping the programme going here all through last year.
Colum, it was an honour. I loved it, and I loved all the people here in the BBC, and what an indulgence to play music that you enjoy for a year. It was
couldn't
terrific.
beat it. Yeah. Well, that you've been doing all sorts of other things, obviously, during that year, one of them being the production of this album. The track we just heard, inspired by a monastic wood turner, I believe. What pictures go through your head listening to that and thinking about the man in question?
Well, I know Kieran Farbs, brother Kieran Farbs. He's down in Glenstall in Limerick, and he's a man very, very passionate about music, all sorts of music, especially opera. But a terrific wood turner, and a man with an international reputation for turning beautiful bowls. And a lot of it would be fallen wood from round the estate. And he fashions bowls out of the most beautiful bowls out of all sorts of elm and beech and other types of wood. But I had this kind of bizarre image in my head of Kieran Farbs working a foot lathe or a treadle lathe, which he doesn't, of course, but I had this image of him in the monk's cassock and
the white rope around his waist.
Aye, all of that, and him very exasperated and maybe a bit cranky from the night before kind of stuff, and the wood not turning and the lathe rather not turning at regular revolutions, and hence the tune itself kind of undulating between different tempi and things like that.
Sort of kind of a turmoil between a jig and a reel in there somehow.
Absolutely that. Mm-hmm. And I took delivery about a year ago or a year and a half ago of a very beautiful bowl from Kieran, and it was always in my mind to write something for him to mark that. And you look at the bowl, you hold the bowl, you touch the bowl, and it's every time I return to it, I see something different, or a different pattern and a different hue in it. I think it's an extraordinary craft, and very intuitive craft, I think, that you need to have the feel for. But Farbs is a great man, no doubt.
Well, the wood of the instruments in the quartet certainly paying a great tribute to that man. Could you remind us?